Hello, my name is Sharon Stefanian and I'm a superintendent with the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. I am responsible for the Safe Schools Action Plan, and I would like to welcome you to this overview of the Community Partner Advisory Group meeting that was held on December the 8th, 2021. For those community partners who were present around the virtual table, thank you for joining us at that time, and we are hopeful that this presentation will serve as an overview reminder of the work that happened during that session. For community partners who were unable to join us on December the 8th, we are hopeful that this presentation will give you an idea of the topics that were addressed during that meeting on December the 8th, and we are hopeful that we will see you at subsequent meetings. Throughout the slide deck that you will be viewing, you will be hearing from myself and also my colleague Jason Rizza. Jason is the system principal who is responsible for Safe Schools. And with that, we will move on in the presentation. We would like to take a moment to reflect upon the land that we are privileged enough to be situated upon within our community. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt represents the treaty relationship between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Anishinaabe with respect to sharing the land and resources thereon. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River. We're now going to move into the agenda for the virtual meeting that was held on December the 8th. While the meeting that evening did include a number of interactive components, we are including those in the agenda and this overview so that there is an opportunity for those who were unable to attend to have a clear sense of the meeting on that particular day. So we will have begun with a bit of a welcome, introductions, and a thank you to those who were around the virtual table on December the 8th, those who have participated previously, and those community partners who will participate as we go forward. We then spent a little bit of time getting to know the partners around the table and reviewing the MS Teams platform, as it is the virtual platform that we will be using in our meetings. We then took a bit of a reflective stance to share what we heard through the work of the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel, as well as what we continue to learn, all which have led to the commitments that we have made and are making to students, to parents, guardians, caregivers, and to our community partners, which have led to the development of the Safe Schools Action Plan. We then turn our focus to the purpose of the Community Partner Advisory Group, and then seeking input from our community partners around how they want to be connected with and provide their input in their thinking into the work connected to the Safe Schools Action Plan, and finally an opportunity for participants to provide feedback to inform the meetings as we go forward to ensure the meetings are best meeting the needs of those who are participating. We want to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to the community partners who were gathered around the virtual table on December the 8th for giving your time and making the conversation around bullying prevention and intervention within HWDSB schools a priority. Thank you to your organizations for participating around the virtual table and committing not only to being part of the process for the first meeting, but also participation in subsequent meetings. We'd also like to say thank you to the students, to the parents, guardians, caregivers, to the community partners and the staff who were part of the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel process. Thank you for making the time and for having the courage to share your stories. We want you to know that we have heard your stories and we are responding. The Safe Schools Action Plan, which you can access on the HWDSB website, provides the details around the actions that we are going to be taking as a result of what we heard. We appreciate the suggestions and ideas that surfaced at that time and are looking forward to further discussion with students, with parents, guardians, and caregivers, with community partners, and with staff as we look at other suggestions and ideas that can be implemented as we go forward. We appreciate the commitment that you have shown to making things better for students within HWDSB schools as well as within the broader community. We know it is important to come together as a community to have this conversation, to work together, to collaborate together. We know that we will make a difference for all of our students. While we are hopeful that it won't be much longer before we are able to meet in a face-to-face setting, in the short term, we are continuing to use Microsoft Teams as the vehicle for our online conversations. Participants are welcome to use their camera and to leave their camera on throughout the meeting. However, we also respect that some individuals may prefer to not have their camera on, and so please do whatever makes you comfortable. On your Microsoft Teams screen, you should have a toolbar. The toolbar may be at the top or the bottom or the side, depending upon your Teams setup. The key icons, if you are using Microsoft Teams for the first time, that you will use most frequently as we continue to gather are the microphone button, which will allow you to mute and unmute your microphone. We ask that you keep your microphone muted while we are meeting, unless, of course, you are unmuting it to ask a question or to make a comment, to share a suggestion. Sometimes background noise may make it difficult for others to hear. There is the camera on and off button. Again, please feel free to use as you are comfortable. There are three dots, and those three dots or ellipses will open up the device settings within Microsoft Teams, and this is where you will also find the setting to turn on live captions. We will continue as we go forward to provide voice over PowerPoint sessions so that you will have the opportunity to go back and to listen to meeting content again. Throughout, extremely important that we are hearing your voice and your perspective. So feel free to use the raise hand, lower hand feature if you have a comment, or also to use the chat feature and to enter your questions or comments in that area. And when our meetings end, of course, the leave button to hang up and to leave the call.
The discussions about relationship issues can be deeply connected to a person's identity and their experiences as they relate to that identity, including racism, classism, ableism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, faith, and many more, and are often framed historically and culturally through the lens of colonialism. As such, we encourage participants to reflect upon the emotions they may be feeling, arrange for a support person to be available to them after the meeting, and to reach out to the facilitator who will be able to assist them if they experience discomfort. Staff remain behind at the end of each session for those who are triggered in any way and needing support for next steps. During both sessions, participants were invited to participate in polls and chats. Polls presented difficulty to some, and we are working with IT personnel to rectify this for our next meeting. Both the Safe Schools survey as well as the community consultation provided the panel with insight into the extent of how significant the problem of bullying is in HWDSB schools and our community. According to the survey, data collected pre-COVID, almost 60% of HWDSB students had been bullied at any rate, and 20% reported being bullied frequently. We heard that certain groups experience bullying at higher rates. For example, students who identify as Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+, were particularly vulnerable. Throughout the consultation, many students shared they had experienced bullying as a direct result of their race, ethnicity, newcomer status, sexuality, gender identity, disability, religion, and Indigenous identity. The panel's literature review and consultations confirmed what many already know that bullying causes significant harm. Bullying victimization is associated with low self-esteem, loneliness, depression, anxiety, suicidality, and poor academic achievement. We also heard from both the survey and consultation that bullying is most likely to take place in areas of little or no supervision, such as during breaks and outdoor recess. When it does happen, we heard about inconsistent processes for reporting and responding, as well as poor communication. Phrases like a lack of action and poor follow through were used frequently throughout the consultation process. We heard from everyone, including educators and administrators, that there is a lack of role clarity, transparency, and accountability when it comes to bullying reporting and response. Many staff recognize they play a critical role in bullying prevention and intervention, but spoke of not always knowing how to respond appropriately when they witness an incident of bullying. Staff want practical, targeted training and knowledge. Educators and principals are critical champions for positive school climate and effective bullying response, but we heard from all that curriculum expectations, multiple competing priorities, and inability to effectively utilize community-based expertise and resources makes it difficult to respond to bullying effectively. Everyone spoke of the need for more and better mental health supports in schools, both to prevent bullying and to respond after bullying incidents occur. What we have heard has necessitated that we commit to a firm direction that focuses on being transparent with respect to our Safe Schools Action Plan. Regular updates will be shared publicly throughout our work. We will continue to develop, collaborate, and review structures that are reflective of the voice of all our community and use that voice to inform board and school planning that again will be shared publicly. We continue to explore and develop multiple ways of engaging and receiving feedback from those most impacted by our decisions to ensure that our work is collaborative and reflective of their voices. And finally, we heard loud and clear that we've got work to do in rebuilding trust with students and families. We know that listening and responding to the voices we hear in a way that demonstrates we've listened is the first step to doing this. Parents, students, staff, and community are all encouraged to take a look at our Safe Schools Action Plan on our website as demonstrated in this slide.
As we are doing this work, it is extremely important that we center the voices of those who are most directly impacted by the decisions, by the strategies, by the recommendations. We spent some time having conversations with students, with parents, guardians, caregivers, and with community partners to really try to understand what structures would be seen as being the most effective ways in which to gather voice and to respond to the voice that we were hearing. We also know that those unique perspectives are absolutely critical perspectives to have at the table when we are looking at strategies that we are putting in place at the classroom level as well as at the broader school level. As a result, we have established 3 advisory groups. The first advisory group is a student advisory group. Student advisory group has elementary and secondary students from HWDSB schools around that advisory group table. We heard from students loud and clear that it was extremely important that the group be co-facilitated by youth who had lived experience related to bullying. The student group is going to be co-facilitated by a recent HWDSB graduate with lived experience, as well as a second youth who is a current HWDSB student selected from within the advisory group. We also have established the Parent Guardian Caregiver Advisory Group. Thank you to those parents, guardians, caregivers who responded to the invitation for participation. Currently, that group has over 60 parent, guardians, and caregivers, and that particular group is meeting as two structures in order to be able to facilitate smaller dialogue and conversation. And to those who were around the virtual table on December the 8th and those community partners who may be reviewing this presentation for the first time, the third advisory group is that of our community partners. And we thank all individuals who responded to the invitations. If individuals are interested in becoming part of any of the advisory groups, please feel free to access the email information on the board website and send an email indicating your interest. So we're going to turn our attention to the community partner group and to dig a little bit deeper on the purpose of this specific advisory group. So this advisory group, like other advisory groups, are going to be providing thinking, input, and feedback to the working groups who are focusing on 10 different priority areas related to bullying prevention and intervention. And this will happen in a very open-ended way without proposing a specific product or service to the board. To be a little more specific, the Safe Schools Action Plan has a number of action items, and those action items have been further grouped into 10 different priority areas or themed areas. Individuals who have volunteered to be part of advisory groups will have the opportunity to provide input and perspective and thinking on all of the draft strategies coming forward from each of those working groups. Individuals who are participating in the advisory groups will also have the opportunity to sit directly on a working group if that is something that they would like to do. But we certainly do recognize the many demands on your time and appreciate you being involved in the advisory group structure. Any of the ideas that are coming forward for implementation in a draft form, there will be the opportunity to give a perspective on. This is important because it provides that common foundation and allows all of us to work together towards that common goal. Recognizing that the community partner table has individuals who are representing their organization, it is important to mention at this point that participation in the community partner advisory table does not grant use of the HWDSB logo as we go forward. Let's focus on each of the working group areas. As mentioned, there are 10 different working groups. The work of each of these groups is going to flow in a draft way to the student, parent, guardian, caregiver, and community partner advisory groups. However, we recognize there may be some around the community partner advisory table who would be interested in participating in the working groups. And so for that reason, we're going to provide a brief high-level overview of each of the 10 groups. The first group is the student voice group. Now I will mention as we're talking about student voice that the student voice group is the student voice work is pivotal in all of the 10 working group areas. So while there is a dedicated student voice group, the role of student voice and centering of student voice is essential in all areas. In that way, there are a number of the working groups where the work overlaps with other groups, and so collaboration and coordination is extremely important. Now, focusing on the student voice group for just a moment, individuals who are gathered around that working group table are really going to be focusing in on how we intentionally gather student voice at the school and system level. How do we hear that voice? How do we respond to that voice? How do we communicate back what has changed as a result of the voice that has been gathered? Extremely important that the voice of those who have been impacted by bullying are part of the work of the Student Voice Group. Student Voice Group is also going to be looking at the role of the Student Ombudsperson. The Student Ombudsperson is a new role within HWDSB that was created in September 2021. In the short term, to access that service, individuals can email human rights, one word, at hwdsb.on.ca. That individual is available to provide support if there are concerns from students or parents, guardians, and caregivers around an incident of bullying. If they have questions, you're looking for clarification, or you may have concerns around a way in which an incident of bullying was addressed, you may contact that support. The Student Voice Group is going to be looking at how do we communicate and make students and families aware that the service exists? How do we create a barrier-free process to accessing that service? The second working group is focusing on the important work of school improvement planning, but specifically in providing materials and resources, essentially a toolkit to schools to help them as they are thinking about positive culture and well-being, but specifically around bullying prevention and intervention within their schools. What is the process of creating a strategy, enacting the strategy, measuring the impact, and then making modifications based upon what they have implemented? This also includes how do we ensure parent voice informs what happens in schools with respect to bullying prevention and intervention. Working group number 3 has the broadest mandate when it comes to the working groups because they are looking at various components that are connected to bullying response. This includes creating the learning materials that will be used by staff, learning materials for students, and material for parents. So there is that shared understanding of processes. In addition to that, this is the group that is focusing on the proactive work of bullying prevention. For those around the community partner advisory table, if you have a young person in your life who attends an HWDSB school, you may be aware of Reimagining Wellness. That was the beginning of the school year, 6-week focus on centering student identity, centering student voice, creating conditions where students were safe, supported, included, creating that sense of belonging, the sense of connectedness, really focusing on positive relationships. We know at its core, bullying is a relationship issue, and providing that foundational piece was a proactive element of addressing bullying in schools. The work of Reimagining Wellness will continue throughout the school year and will continue into the next school year, and informing that proactive work is part of the work of the Bullying Response Working Group. They're also going to be looking at how schools respond when bullying happens. That includes communication. They're going to be looking at supports for students who have been impacted by bullying. How do we document bullying? How do we report on incidences of bullying? Those all fit under bullying response. Group number 4 is going to be looking at specifically supervision, or more globally, where bullying happens. Now, the concept of supervision relates to a number of minutes in which staff are on duty and supervising. And those minutes are determined provincially. So while we don't have the ability to influence the minutes, we do have the ability to influence and to have conversations around what happens during supervision time. But even broader than that, what we heard from students is that bullying happens where adults are not present. So this working group is going to be focusing on providing the resources for schools to determine where those areas are and what are some of the strategies that can be put in place in order to address. Of course, the role of student voice and parent voice and staff voice in developing strategies within that context are extremely important. Working group number 5 is focusing on the Safe Schools Action Plan recommendations specifically connected to special education. Those areas of focus were already or are already underway. They were underway at the time in which the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Review Panel shared their recommendations, and their recommendations essentially spoke to continuing work that was already ongoing through our Specialized Services Department. So where appropriate, and where appropriate strategies are being put in place, they will come to the various advisory group structures for review. Group number 6 is the Bullying Policy and Procedure Working Group. The Ministry of Education recently released some new guidelines with respect to bullying prevention, intervention, and responding. And so this group is going to be looking at what our current policy procedures are, what are the ministry recommendations, what are the actions within the Safe Schools Action Plan, and developing a new policy and procedure. Working group number 7 is focusing on healthy relationships or character education. This includes developing a consistent approach across our schools when it comes to supporting staff and students in developing healthy relationships, and this includes a very specific focus on social emotional skill development. Group number 8 is going to be looking at the data that is connected to incidents of bullying within schools. This group is going to be developing a strategy around the data connected to prevention, intervention, and responding. Specifically, what is collected, how is it shared with the broader community. This includes looking at identifying the measures around bullying and determining the reporting approach. What are the tools that need to be created to support accountability with students, parents, guardians, caregivers, in our broader community? And looking at the processes to regularly gather student voice and to respond to that voice. Working group number 9 is a group whose work, for the most part, covers all working group areas, and that much of the work will conclude by June of 2022. And that is really focusing in on the area of privacy as it pertains to incidents of bullying, and developing a guidance document that highlights the information that can and will be shared when there is an incident of bullying in a school, and how that information is shared with students and families. And the last area, the last working group area, is the working group area of performance monitoring. All of the work that is happening with the very targeted intent of addressing bullying within HWDSB schools. And the performance monitoring group is going to be looking at an approach to gathering what the impact is of all of the strategies that are being implemented, whether or not we are seeing a decrease in bullying behavior in schools, and identifying those strategies that are effective and those strategies that need to be revisited. At this point in the virtual meeting, we turned attention over to our community advisory group members with the following poll question. We asked which of the 10 areas that were identified were they most interested in. That information is helpful for us as staff in terms of setting agendas and prioritizing items within the agenda. There was a poll question that was available, and individuals had the opportunity to provide further information within the chat. In the follow-up feedback form, we certainly encourage and welcome those who are interested in participating in any of the working groups to indicate that information as part of feedback gathered. Centering the voices of those who are most impacted by the work is priority as we continue to go forward. At this point in our virtual meeting, we turned attention to gathering information from those who were participating on how they would like to be informed and provide input to the working groups. We recognize after the first initial meeting, there may be individuals who decide that this particular structure is not the structure for them, and we completely understand and honor that decision. As I spoke about a little earlier, through the Dropbox. There is opportunity for individuals to always provide feedback to the working groups. There also will be a pop-up structure. We held our first pop-up last spring. We'll continue to hold pop-up structures, pop-up sessions when there are specific questions that working groups have for either parents or for students or for our community partners. However, for those who continue to gather around the virtual table, it was important for us to hear how we best meet your needs in hearing and gathering your voice. So some of the ideas included reading drafts of the material coming forward from working groups and then having the opportunity to email input in. Also, there may be some around the advisory group tables who would like to be part of working groups, as we've discussed earlier. For all of the working group recommendations, there will be an opportunity to listen to a short presentation at the advisory table and then to provide input through the table. But there may also be other ways in which individuals would like to engage with the draft material and to provide feedback. So at this time, individuals were provided with an opportunity to share with us their ideas and their thinking around what approach would best meet their needs as we go forward.
Part of our commitment to doing this work in a way that is transparent and that listens to your voice, you will be receiving an email that will have this recorded version of our presentation, as well as a survey link that will ask questions to help shape the planning around subsequent meetings in the new year. In terms of next steps, there are some action items that we will be bringing to the group to provide feedback and a focus for our work moving forward. As mentioned in the previous slide, please feel free to add any thoughts, suggestions to your survey response that you feel might help this process. As mentioned during the presentation, we will be looking at reviewing the feedback we received from the survey you are completing to start our next meeting, as well as confirming our Safe Spaces agreement to ensure that we all feel safe in participating in this important work. In addition, we do have a draft of a student safety plan that we will be bringing to the group for feedback and suggestions. We would like to close this slide deck with a sincere thank you to all of you who have been so generous with your time and thoughts with respect to how this work can be done collaboratively and in a way that is informed by all voices. We are excited to continue this important collaboration in the new year and look forward to listening to how we can do it in new ways that support all perspectives.